My God, this show. Each and every single week, this show gets worse and worse. Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Monday Night Raw recap and results video. And my God, this show was absolutely boring tonight. Monday Night Raw is 3 hours, and it felt like I was watching tonight's Monday Night Raw. Felt like 5 hours. That's what it felt like. It felt like I was watching this show for 5 hours tonight. That's how boring this show was. It's like WWE is on autopilot. Like they don't give a shit, and they're just going to start things up again once we get to the Royal Rumble. Why not take the whole month of December off? If you're not going to do anything creative, Vince or Bruce. Oh man, what do we see on tonight's show? We had Asuka versus Shayna Baszler. We had Dana Brooke and Ricochet versus Reckoning and Slapjack. Didn't we see Dana Brooke versus Reckoning last week? And did we see Ricochet and Slapjack last week? So we had a mixed tag team match. We had Kofi Kingston versus Shelton Benjamin. I called that last week. If you guys saw my video last week, I called it. I'm like, what are we going to get next week? We're going to have Kofi Kingston versus Shelton Benjamin. And look, it happened tonight. So then we also had Cedric Alexander versus Kofi Kingston. We had a 3-on-2 handicap match with AJ Styles, The Miz, and John Morrison versus Drew McIntyre and Sheamus. I'm like, The Miz and Drew McIntyre, we've been seeing this for like, what, a month already? And we just saw The Miz take on McIntyre at Tribute to the Troops. Well, if you guys watched Tribute to the Troops this weekend. And then we have Bobby Lashley versus Jeff Hardy. And Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. And I'm like, why put this match on when we know it's going to be a fuck finish because Randy Orton is taking on The Fiend, Bray Wyatt also at TLC. Why was this on the show? They couldn't wait for TLC? So, yeah, but let's jump right into the recap and results video. Let's get this out of the way. Oh, and by the way, tonight's show, no Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss wasn't even on tonight's show. She's supposed to be there, Bray Wyatt, and she wasn't even on. So, there you go. Well, let's jump right into the recap results. So, Monday Night Raw opened up tonight, and this was the final Monday Night Raw from the Amway Center in the Thunderdome. The same one for SmackDown on Friday, which I forgot to mention in my SmackDown review. But both SmackDown and Monday Night Raw, they are the final shows coming from the Amway Center because WWE is moving the Thunderdome to Tropicana Field, which they already started construction there. And this Friday on SmackDown is going to be the first show from Tropicana Field. So, and then, Monday Night Raw next week is going to take place at Tropicana Field. So that's basically the new home for WWE's Thunderdome. So, but just had to get that little news out of the way. But the show opened up tonight, of course, with the tribute to Pat Patterson, passed away last Wednesday from cancer. He was 79. And we saw, the roster on the stage. We saw Triple H and Vince McMahon there. And they did the 10-bell salute for Pat Patterson, the same that we saw on SmackDown. And then we went to the Raw intro. And then we went to Randy Orton coming out. Randy Orton made his way out. Orton ended up saying that he compares himself to the Fiend and how he doesn't need to wear a mask. And he ended up saying that when his time comes, he will stare the devil in the face and let him know that the most evil son of a bitch has come home. Orton ended up saying that in the meantime, he will be knocking on the door of the Firefly Funhouse, waiting and wondering just exactly who is going to let him in. So then we had the Firefly Funhouse intro come on. Bray Wyatt was shown waving on the screen. Bray Wyatt ended up saying that it's so nice of Orton to join him. He ended up saying that Alexa Bliss would have joined them tonight, but she's not here because Orton was mean to her last week in that Moment of Bliss segment. Orton ended up saying that he's the last person Bray Wyatt wants to play games with. So then we get a game show parody, and it was called Let's Get Randy, which was the name of the game show. So Bray Wyatt ends up introducing the prizes. The prizes were a brand new crucifix and the carcass of Friendship Frog. So then we had the contestants who were Mercy the Buzzard, Rambling Rabbit, Huskus the Pig, and Bray Wyatt ended up asking the question is, how should Orton be punished at TLC? So then Mercy the Buzzard, Rambling Rabbit, and Huskus the Pig, they all got a chance to answer. Bray Wyatt ended up saying that none of his contestants are correct. But fortunately for Orton, he always has the right answer. So, of course, we got flashes of the Fiend. Randy Orton ended up saying that he will play games if Bray Wyatt wants to. So Orton wanted to have a match with Bray Wyatt later on in the night. So Bray Wyatt ended up accepting. So the Firefly Funhouse music ended up starting up. Bray Wyatt ended up waving bye to Randy Orton. And that was how the segment ended. But overall, this was a pretty decent segment here. Very fun, Firefly Funhouse. I thought the game show parody, Let's Get Randy, was, pretty funny. Bray Wyatt having that white-haired wig and the microphone, the small microphone. So I thought that was funny. But who's hyped for a Randy Orton Bray Wyatt, match? Ugh. Yeah, wait till I get to that. So then we had Asuka versus Shayna Baszler. Of course, Asuka came out along with Lana. Shayna came out with Nia. So before the match got underway, we had Nia Jax getting Shayna Baszler hyped up, and that she's ready to destroy Asuka. So pretty much, the match started off with Asuka and Shayna Baszler back and forth. Baszler ended up taking Asuka down, worked on Asuka's ankle, and they ended up trading counters in the middle of the ring. And at the end of the match, we had Asuka end up rolling up Shayna Baszler for the win, because we had Lana end up countering Nia Jax. She ended up sending Nia Jax face first into the announce table. And that was when Asuka ended up taking advantage of the match and rolled up Shayna Baszler. So there you go. Asuka ended up winning the match. Overall, very meh match. And so then we had Ricochet and Dana Brooke versus Slapjack and Reckoning. What was so different that we haven't seen last week when they went one-on-one? We have Ricochet going one-on-one with Slapjack last week, which Slapjack ended up defeating Ricochet, and then Dana Brooke and Reckoning. What was so different that what we saw last week when they were in the ring? Dana Brooke defeated Reckoning, aka Mia Yim, last week, with Mia Yim's mask falling off last week. I mean, what was so different? This match was boring. It was absolutely boring. Dana Brooke and Ricochet end up winning the match, where we had Dana Brooke end up holding Reckoning on her shoulders. She ended up nailing a Michinoku driver, and then Dana Brooke went for the pin, and that was that. So 2 weeks in a row, Mia Yim has been pinned. Awful. Absolutely awful. Post-match, he had Mustafa Ali end up coming into the ring. He was yelling at Reckoning, Mia Yim, then at Slapjack, or Flapjack, whatever you want to call him. And he was basically blaming the both of them for another loss and how they're embarrassing him. That was that. But boring match. So then Keith Lee ended up approaching Sheamus backstage. Keith Lee ended up saying to Sheamus that everyone in the locker room knows it's just a matter of time before he turns on Drew McIntyre and stabs him in the back. So Sheamus ended up getting up. He got in Keith Lee's face, and Sheamus ended up excusing himself so he can go turn on the champ and beat the hell out of him. So Sheamus then stared Keith Lee down, and he ended up walking off. So that was that. Then Monday Night Raw went to commercial. Then when Monday Night Raw came back from the commercial, Byron Saxton, Samoa Joe, and Tom Phillips ended up congratulating Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch because today Becky had her daughter, had the baby, and they named her Roux. I think that's how you pronounce the name. Maybe wrong on it. But congratulations to both Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. So, really happy for them. Congrats to them. And then we had Miz TV. Miz and Morrison were out there. This segment was absolutely awful. Miz ended up welcoming us to Miz TV. He ends up talking about how busy he's been. Mentions about tribute to the troops. And he has to plug, of course, Miz and Mrs. because if he doesn't, then USA Network will probably be mad at him because USA Network loves the Miz. He's on Monday Night Raw. He has Miz and Mrs. And he also has that game show Cannonball. So, he has to promote that. He has to promote Miz and Mrs. because USA Network absolutely loves him. So he ends up saying tonight, him, Morrison, and Styles have this handicap match. So then he ends up introducing him and Morrison's partner, who of course is AJ Styles. Styles can't end up coming out, of course, with Almost. So Miz ended up apologizing. He says that he couldn't find a big enough chair for Almost. So Almost ended up watching from ringside. And Styles ended up saying that he prefers to stand. So Miz and Morrison ended up asking Styles about his plan for TLC against Drew McIntyre. Styles ended up saying that it's pretty challenging because this is the first time he's facing McIntyre, and he plans to take a chair and wrap it around McIntyre until it breaks. And he's going to put McIntyre through every table he sees. So he will be coughing up splinters for months. So Styles ended up going on about talking about McIntyre's size, his heart and strength, and he ended up saying that all that won't mean a thing when he knocks McIntyre out cold. and then climbs the ladder to reclaim his spot at the top of the mountain as the new WWE champion. So Morrison ends up saying that if McIntyre makes it to TLC, Miz ended up reminding Styles that they have the chance to annihilate McIntyre and Sheamus in the handicap match later on in the night. So Miz and Morrison mock Sheamus and McIntyre's accents. Sheamus then came out. Sheamus ended up saying that Miz and Morrison nailed those accents. And he ended up saying, as entertaining as it was, he's tired of everyone in the back saying he would betray McIntyre. So Sheamus had some fighting words for Miz and Morrison. Miz ended up pointing to how Sheamus has no one standing with him, while there are 3 in the ring. Sheamus ended up saying that's not exactly correct. So now came McIntyre. Sheamus and McIntyre were in the ring. They were facing off with Miz, Morrison, and Styles. McIntyre ends up knocking Styles. And they were saying about how they keep coming back for more each time they get knocked down. So McIntyre ends up recalling how everyone in the back thinks The Miz has no balls. So he ended up saying that he knows Miz has balls, just not original ones, because Maurice keeps those in her purse, which I thought that was funny. He ended up saying Miz replaced those balls with Morrison's when he made him his personal sidekick bitch. So we saw Styles end up stand out with Almost, and Sheamus and McIntyre end up brawling with The Miz and Morrison. They end up clearing the ring. And we saw McIntyre end up grabbing the briefcase, the Money in the Bank briefcase, and he launched it across to the stage. And he forced The Miz to run and get it. And The Miz was running to get it. He was like, my briefcase, my briefcase. So the briefcase ended up taking out a LED board on the Tron. And so that was basically that. But awful segment. And then we had Kofi Kingston versus Shelton Benjamin, which I called last week. I said, oh yeah, next week on Monday Night Raw, we're going to get Kofi Kingston versus Shelton Benjamin. And then we're possibly going to get the week after Xavier Woods and Bobby Lashley, or Kofi Kingston, Bobby Lashley. And then we'll possibly go into TLC with the Raw Tag Team titles on the line again. So, but we had Kofi Kingston versus Shelton Benjamin, which this was a short match. Kofi Kingston ended up hitting Trouble in Paradise to Shelton Benjamin. There you go. Kofi ended up winning the match. Post-match, Cedric Alexander got on the mic. He ended up calling Kofi to get back into the ring. Cedric ended up saying that he's tired of the New Day slipping through the cracks, and that he wants Kofi to come back into the ring so he can do him like he did Xavier Woods last week. So Kofi ended up walking back down the ramp, and then Monday Night Raw went to commercial. Then when Monday Night Raw came back, we had Kofi Kingston versus Cedric Alexander, which was a okay match. Wasn't great or perfect by any means, though. Cedric ended up winning. Lumbar check to Kofi Kingston. Cedric Alexander ended up winning. Overall, okay match. And then we went to the 2-on-3 handicap match. Sheamus and McIntyre versus Styles, The Miz, and Morrison. Which, this was just very, meh, in my opinion. We had a points in the match where Sheamus and McIntyre, were butting heads. So at the end of the match, we had Styles, Miz, and Morrison win, where we saw Sheamus being caught off guard because Sheamus ended up delivering a Brooke kick for John Morrison, but Morrison ended up getting out of the way, and Sheamus ended up Brooke kicking McIntyre. So Sheamus was caught off guard because of that, and it allowed Styles to hit the phenomenal forearm to Sheamus. So there you go. Styles, Miz, and Morrison end up winning the match. Just overall, just a very meh match. And we all know that it's going to be possibly Sheamus and McIntyre, going at it soon because of what we saw during here at points in the match. Which I'm going to get to what happened backstage because there was something backstage with McIntyre and Sheamus, which I will get to. So then we had Charlie Caruso. She approaches Sheamus backstage. He was pacing around. She ended up asking about the Bro kick to McIntyre, which was accidental. Sheamus ended up knowing that McIntyre is going to come back here and try to kick his ass. So he's going to try to kick McIntyre's ass back. And, we saw, some of the superstars there because it was in catering. Like we saw Nikki Cross there, Dana Brooke. So we saw all them hanging out in catering. So Charlie Caruso asked Sheamus if the kick was intentional, which Sheamus then said it was not. McIntyre then ended up approaching Sheamus. They ended up facing off. Sheamus ended up asking if he knows the kick was accidental, which McIntyre ended up acknowledging, and he ended up asking Sheamus if he knows what's about to happen. So we had McIntyre and Sheamus stare each other down. Monday Night Raw went to commercial. Then when Monday Night Raw came back, we saw Drew McIntyre and Sheamus brawling in catering backstage. And we saw the superstars there cheering them on. We had Drew Gulak end up recording this brawl on his phone. And then we had Pat Buck, who was one of the WWE producers. He got in between McIntyre and Sheamus, and he ended up breaking the fight up between them. And Sheamus ended up asking if this guy is serious. So McIntyre and Sheamus team up, and they beat up on Pat Buck. They end up slamming him through the catering table with chips on there. You saw like Cheetos there. I'm like, no, not the Cheetos. Which I had to be sarcastic at that. So I'm like, Pat Buck. In July, he got beat up by Nia Jax twice. Which, when Pat Buck ended up suspending Nia Jax ended up beating him down. So yeah, he got beat up by Nia Jax back in July, and then here he got beat up by Sheamus and McIntyre. So, but I don't know. This is to me, though. But doesn't Pat Buck kind of remind you, if you listen to Sam Roberts' podcast on SiriusXM? Does Pat Buck look a little like Sam Roberts? I mean, that's just me, though. But to me, he kind of looks like Sam Roberts. So, but Sheamus and McIntyre were on the same page. They were laughing. Sheamus ended up saying that it's McIntyre's turn to buy the beer. So they walk off. Adam Pearce is there, and other officials to check on Pat Buck, and that was that. So pretty much, it was basically a swerve here, thinking, oh, McIntyre and Sheamus we're gonna, get, a match between them, which will probably are later on down the line. So, but WWE is not going to do this now. I think they're going to have some build for it. So then we had Bobby Lashley versus Jeff Hardy, which this was just, it was decent in my opinion. We had Lashley end up slamming Jeff Hardy. Lashley ended up taking down Jeff Hardy, kept him, down with moves. Lashley ended up manhandling Jeff Hardy more, rocked Jeff Hardy into the corner. We had MVP barking orders at Bobby Lashley, which I forgot to mention, before the match got underway, Jeff Hardy was shown backstage warming up, and then Matt Riddle then approached him. Matt Riddle had some donuts, which on the box, it said BRONUTS. And he ended up asking Jeff Hardy if he has a minute. Jeff Hardy ended up saying that he does not because he has the match. So, but that was that, just Matt Riddle having, BRONUTS. I'm like, what do you put in those donuts? But yeah, the BRONUTS time. So we had Matt Riddle also down there, which we had Matt Riddle end up yanking MVP off the apron because MVP was distracting Jeff Hardy from the ring apron. Lashley was looking to capitalize, but Matt Riddle ended up running down, and he ended up yanking MVP off the ring apron, which Lashley ended up coming out to the floor. And Jeff Hardy ended up dropping Lashley at ringside. And then at the end of the match, you had Lashley end up applying the Hurt Lock on Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy was able to hit the Twist of Fate to Bobby Lashley. Jeff Hardy went to the top, and he had to. He was going to hit the Swanton Bomb, which Lashley ended up getting up, but Jeff Hardy ended up landing on his feet, and then Lashley ended up doing a spear, which Jeff Hardy ended up selling really well, and that led to Lashley end up applying the Hurt Lock to Jeff Hardy. So there you go. Lashley ended up winning the match. Post-match, Lashley still kept the Hurt Lock on Jeff Hardy. Matt Riddle ended up getting on the apron. MVP tried to pull him off, but MVP got kicked into the barricade. Matt Riddle then ended up entering the ring, and he ended up making the save, but Lashley ended up shoving Jeff Hardy into Matt Riddle, knocking them into the corner. And MVP and Lashley went back up the ramp, and we just saw MVP eat one of the donuts, or the BRONUTS. So, well, that was that. Then we had Randy Orton backstage in his locker room. We had someone knock on his locker room door. He ends up answering, and no one was there. So Ramblin' Rabbit was there by the door. Ramblin' Rabbit ended up telling Orton that Bray Wyatt can't wait to see Orton in the ring, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's when Monday Night Raw went to commercial. And then we had the main event, Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. This was absolutely boring. I'm like, why have this match when Orton and him are going to be having a match at TLC? Even though it's going to be The Fiend, it's still Bray Wyatt. It's Bray Wyatt in the mask. So, but why do we even have this match on the show tonight when we're going to be seeing it at TLC? But in the end, we had the lights start to go down in the Amway Center, and it looked like that the Fiend was going to arrive. And Orton ended up dropping Bray Wyatt with the RKO. And then the lights end up going out in the Amway Center. We heard the sounds of the Fiend. The Virtual Boy red lights came on. Orton looked over at Bray Wyatt, and of course it was the Fiend. Bray Wyatt had the Fiend mask on because of course he is the Fiend. So the Fiend ended up attacking Orton, and he took Orton down with the mandible claw. And the Fiend was just keeping the mandible claw on Orton, kept him grounded with the mandible claw as Monday Night Raw went off the air. And that was that. But absolutely boring match. The match ended in no contest because these guys are having a match at TLC. So like I said, why have Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt tonight when the match is already set for TLC? It's like throwaway. Let's just get something on the show because we have nothing else. So there you go. But overall, Monday Night Raw tonight, very boring show. Absolutely terrible. But anyways, that's it for the Monday Night Raw recap and results video. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Definitely give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I will be checking out Impact tomorrow. I'm not a huge fan of Impact, but I will only be checking out because of Kenny Omega from what we saw at the end of Dynamite last week. So that's the only reason I'll be checking out Impact tomorrow night, because of Kenny Omega. And, you know, it'll be a lead into Wednesday's Dynamite. So yeah, this will be like the second time I'm going to be checking out Impact. I checked it out years ago, did not even care for it. So that's the only reason why I'm watching Impact tomorrow, because of Kenny Omega. So, but anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later.